about that?
Are you ready?
How am I supposed to see your hand in the darkness? And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Thursday, January 26th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by PrizePicks. We got a nice manageable 6-game slate for today, coming off of that monster 10-gamer from yesterday. Craziness abound, including the massive 60 real point performance at a Dame. That's why I'm rocking the Portland Trailblazers gear for today. Felt like I should do something along those lines. You guys should respond the same way by hitting the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how'd it go for you last night?
Went okay. Would have broke even, except I won 50 max the night slate because I wanted to try something. It didn't work, so gave back what I would have made or not made, broke even on in 3 max and single entry. But yeah, it was fine. Ended up third in one of the $100 single entries on the main slate, so that helped. Thanks to Dame.
Fair enough. I didn't even think about it right now as I look at it, but I'm guessing we have like a decent early slate today. We've got 3 games tipping off at 7:30, 1 at 8 o'clock. Then you take the 2-hour jump to 10 and 10:30. So we do have that little chasm of 2 hours between the games. Interesting if you're trying to play like an early slate. It's probably out there for 3 games or 4 games. Probably not too bad if I had to guess. No?
I'm double checking now, but
I would have assumed it was decent, but maybe not.
No, 6 games at 7, or at least on DraftKings. 6 games at 7:30, 2 at 10.
Huh. That's annoying, sort of.
Yeah.
Whatever. What are you going to do?
It saves me from getting like too ambitious and registering the 7:30 slate twice and then running out of time on one of them. And
does tend to happen for you. Yeah. Although in those situations, you're probably like, oh, I accidentally locked the nuts on me early or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there's also that. Guys, make sure you're hitting that like button. We're at 24 now. That should certainly climb up a little bit. And follow us both on Twitter. Handles are below our names. Do you want to just get into this one? We got a lot to talk about. 6-game slates. You sort of have to always talk about the bench guys too. It's that middle ground where you end up talking a lot.
Yeah, let's go.
The New York Knicks are 8.5-point dogs in Boston. 226 total. We're going to start it off on the Knicks side. No Mitchell Robinson and no Evan Fournier. Highest owned guy on the Knicks end. I feel like this the ownership projections got ran off of my computer today. Highest owned guy is Quentin Grimes on DraftKings at 17% ownership. Brunson and Randall both cross into 10. Barrett is around 8. You're getting Jericho Sims around 6. I think where we should start is probably with Sims and with Hartenstein. We got the 48-minute split between those two guys on Tuesday. Jericho Sims did not see the floor in the fourth quarter. It was a very long extended run for Isaiah Hartenstein. How do you want to project those two guys? Because we've got Hartenstein $3,300 center unowned. And we're going to talk about a couple other guys in the sub 4K range that are pulling a ton of ownership that kind of look exactly like Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of tricky because we've only seen, a couple of games, and in one of them, Sims was the clear priority. In the other, you got more of an even split. I think expecting something like 28 to Sims, 20 to Hartenstein, or maybe just, even if you went like 26-18, like it's likely to be 48, but 48 combined. But from a median projection standpoint, if you did just give a couple extra minutes to other guys on the Knicks, I think that's one way you could handle it. Because I really don't have much confidence in where exactly this is going to land. It does make me interested that neither of them are getting ownership, because it's a situation where if you get, like, of the 2 rotations we've seen so far, if you get the 30-minute one from Jericho Sims, he looks pretty good at 4K with power forward eligibility. And if you get the 22 to 23-minute one from Hartenstein, he looks good at 3,300. So it is a situation where I think both guys might end up going a little bit underrepresented, just because you kind of you want to be cautious with median projections. You don't want to just, arbitrarily be jamming Jericho Sims in the lineups because you give him 28 minutes instead of 26. But at the same time, there's a good chance one of these guys ends up playing enough minutes that they look good. Like, if you somehow knew in advance exactly how many minutes these guys play in this game, there's a very good chance you'd be playing one of them a lot.
Yeah. I went 26-22. I didn't have a great feel for it. There's certainly some wiggle room there. In the 4 games, well, in the 3 games that we've seen since Mitchell Robinson got hurt, we've gotten 25, 28, and 33 out of Sims. That's like just such a crapshoot. That 8-minute range is so ridiculous. So I tried to split the difference and assume like, okay, Jericho Sims, barring foul trouble, is going to get 3 real rotations like a starter. That's what they seem to want to be doing. And then after that, all bets are off. You kind of try to average out like if he's playing well, if there's foul trouble. Felt pretty good about 26-22. I could see it becoming like 27-21 by the time we get to lock, but it actually didn't really land me on either one of those guys. Kind of surprised me. I thought I was going to end up taking a bit of a stand on someone like Hartenstein. I'm getting a different pay down backup center that we'll get to in a little bit.
For what it's worth, we have 5 total games this year where Jericho Sims has started without Mitchell Robinson. He's averaged 26 minutes per game. In the games that Hartenstein's played off the bench without Mitchell Robinson, he's averaged 18 minutes per game.
All righty. What do you see for the rest of the Knicks? How do you feel about that Quentin Grimes chalk? His price is like, he's obviously not a great per minute guy, but his price is also not what it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's almost like an annoying ownership level because you and I have been saying for a while how he's never a play that you're really excited to get to in tournaments, but when his price is coming down, he's always like a decent, I'll be contrarian here with the guy playing 34 minutes at a cheap price tag type play. Now he's, pulling 17% ownership. I'm sure this will be the game that he just comes through with, some massive game now that everybody's randomly there just as a result of the slate. But I get why the ownership's there. He's shooting guard, small forward on DraftKings, so that makes him a little bit more valuable. He's 4,300 and he's just likely to give you somewhere in the mid 30s. He's averaged 0.7 DraftKings points per minute this year. It's not like he's a good fantasy option at all, but you're not talking about Reggie Bullock being out there at 4,300 or something. He's better than that. So I get why the ownership's there. It's also the type of play where I'm never upset if I just end up going somewhere else because it's pretty unlikely that Grimes puts up a score that you have to have. It's more so a play where there's a good chance he comes in around like 6x his salary and the savings allow you to get to other plays that really make your night. But whenever you're talking about popular plays like that, it's going to be about to become a lot more likely, but it's unlikely you get like a 40-point game from Quentin Grimes where it's like, oh shit, I can't win without Quentin Grimes.
And today's one of those days where like he's the first guy to start losing ownership as we get more value. He just fits on in the morning because he can be in every position and the salary works for a 30-something minute dude for the day. What do you want to do with Brunson, Randall, Barrett? Does anything jump out to you, or are they sort of just interchangeable?
I think they're kind of just interchangeable. 8% ownership coming into Barrett, 11 to Brunson, 15 to Randall. We got the massive Randall shooting game last night that we seem to get once every couple of weeks now. But from a rotation standpoint, you just saw more of the same. 37.5 minutes for Randall, 10.5 for Obi Toppin. Once again, no center minutes for either of those guys. Could change at any point, but doesn't seem like they're very inclined to do that. RJ Barrett only played 33. Typically, you're going to get more than that. Brunson played 36. You had Quickly back in the rotation at 27 minutes. He comes in at 4,900. Nothing overly exciting there. So I think any of Randall, Brunson, Barrett are just solid enough plays that I'm not going out of my way to target at their respective salaries, but are certainly still just good options.
Anything else for the Knicks?
Nope.
Boston Celtics have looked ridiculous over the past few days. It's different now. Marcus Smart is out. Jaylen Brown, not on the injury report. Al Horford, not on the injury report. Malcolm Brogdon, not on the injury report. No ownership really coming into Boston. Obviously, matchups against the Knicks don't normally look great. But there's one guy here that I'm very surprised to see not pulling a ton of ownership. I'm curious if you see it the same way. When you look at Boston, what do you want to do?
I have no idea who you're referring to.
I really like Robert Williams at 5,600 today.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I think he makes some sense from a tournament standpoint, but I think he's also, given that he's center only on DraftKings, probably close to correctly priced.
4% ownership right now is just wild to me for a guy that I assume is starting and playing like 29, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I expect like 28 to 30. So I think he's a good play. I just don't think he's like, it's still a center. It's still a big enough slate where you're going to have a lot of good center options. So, I think he's a good play. I don't think he's going like wildly under owned or anything.
I don't think the good center options exist as much as you'll see, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, I mean,
he's the guy I'm getting to pretty aggressively for today.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know. I think, I mean, we have him projected for 27 DraftKings points. If you go a little bit higher than that, I wouldn't disagree. But
how many minutes?
I'm double checking that right now. 27.
Okay. Yeah, so that's probably my difference. I got him at 29.
Yeah, so
and those are two.
I think I'd go like 28.
Really? Okay. Seeing him play 31 and a half on Tuesday, like I get they're shorthanded, but he doesn't strike me as the type of guy that you just play extra minutes when you're shorthanded, unless you just want him to be playing more minutes, like they probably do. That's what I'm just curious about his playing time.
Yeah, so like I could see it that way too. I just kind of, to me, it's like, he played 31, but then you get Horford back. I assume that he ends up around like 28, just like, Horford is typically going to play a little bit more when Williams is out, and then just, lose a couple of minutes when he's back.
That's fair. Do you see anything else here for Boston? I find them very difficult to get to.
Yeah, I think they're really tough to get to as well. Shooting guard, small forward on Jaylen Brown at 9,400. You know the type of ceiling you're getting there, but it is a pretty unappealing matchup. We have his optimal percentage about double his ownership, but still only an 8% chance of being optimal. I think it's very tough to get to Tatum with that price tag, given that Jaylen Brown is back. Him and Brown do get a little bit of a bump in assist percentage without Smart, but you're going to be getting more minutes now from Malcolm Brogdon as well. He's up to 6K, makes it tough to really want to get there. There's nothing that stands out to me outside of just tournament filler.
Are you expecting a giant Grant Williams minutes day today? That was what we saw the last time Smart was out with basically no one else out. He played 36 in back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I'll probably end up projecting it around like 30.
Okay. Not that he is the kind of guy that matters at 4,600, but yeah, I really don't have anything else to really add here for Boston. They don't look great. I'm sure we'll regret it, but and obviously, if you get a Jason Tatum lineup, if you get a Jaylen Brown lineup, you're not brokenhearted about it. Their starters are all very, very functional plays. They're just not going to be the primary options in any lineup.
Their starters plus Brogdon, I think, are all perfectly fine. In this lineup, this is how I was different. But there's just nothing that I expect or particularly want to, at the end, as the slate starts, be like, oh, yeah, this was my stand on some guy that just kind of looks completely average.
Agreed. All right, schedule for the rest of the day, folks. 11 a.m. Eastern time. So right after this one, NFL strategy show. We're running short on NFL strategy shows, guys. This season's almost over. We'll get the NHL strategy show at 2 p.m. The No House Advantage NBA show at 3:30. Adam will be back for the deeper dive at 5:30. And then you'll get live before lock NBA style at 6:30. And as usual, I got to mention 5 days free of Stokastic plus Platinum if you are interested. There is a link in the description. You'll also see it in chat. That can get you access to our projections, our ownership, the boom bust tool, which is going to give you target scores and optimal rates and leverage scores. You'll get access to our player compare tool, so you can do all of the 1v1s and 2v2s that you would like to handle. And our lineup generator. We generate thousands of lineups on the back end. We get rid of anything that we think you should not be playing at all. We let you pick through everything else. It's like leafing through a magazine. If you want to keep that lineup, you can click save. If not, discard, you get another one. We'll show you the projections. We'll show you if they're chalky or contrarian or just balanced. You can swap out individual players if you want. You get all of that for 5 days free, so long as you've never signed up at Stokastic before. All righty. Game number 2. The Detroit Pistons are 9-point underdogs in Brooklyn, 231 total. And for right now, you and I are going to need to have a very big conversation. The highest owned guy for the Pistons is 21% owned Jalen Duren at 5,100, center only. That has to assume that Jalen Duren is going to start for this game. Now, the Pistons do have a Q tag on Isaiah Stewart once again, and a Q tag on Isaiah Livers. Those are very important Q tags. Let's say everybody's in. Who's starting, Duren or Bey?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, before the Jalen Duren absence, you saw him starting alongside Isaiah Stewart. and then they brought him back. They brought him off the bench, but then, he's been starting. He played 31 minutes last game. So clearly there's no sort of minutes limit or easing him in anymore. So it really just comes down to when he came back, were they bringing him off the bench just to get him back up to speed? Or was it a change where now Saddiq Bey is a starter? I don't know the answer to that, but it does make a huge difference. And I'm glad this is one of the first games on the slate, because if you get a $5,100 Jalen Duren starting, if Isaiah Stewart's in and Duren's starting, he looks good. If Stewart is out and Duren's starting, he looks even better. He's just going to be a really, really good option. If he's coming off the bench, with Stewart in, you have no reason to be paying $5,100 for him at all.
No. Yeah, that one's a tricky one. Part of the reason that I'm likely getting a lot more Robert Williams is that I am not projecting Jalen Duren to start this game.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense then. Because as soon as you said that there weren't as many centers as I thought, I was like, I'd already looked at the team, so I knew we didn't have like a ton of the really good centers. But I'm just like, you have Jalen Duren against the Nets next game. Like, I'm gonna easily prefer that outside of ownership considerations.
Yeah, I don't have a great feel. That Thursday the 19th game was looming large, but I don't know if that's just because he came back and they didn't want to start those two together. But like, to me, that doesn't make a ton of sense, but I guess it's possible. I don't know. So it's a very interesting dynamic for the Pistons. After that, it's hard to really talk about them without knowing the status of Stewart and Livers. Like, Bogdanovich is 6,900. That's not really like the most appealing price tag in the world. Jaden Ivey works for me at 6,300. That dude just can't make a basket. 10% seems about right. Hayes seems about right from an ownership perspective. Bey is probably difficult to get to, even if he is starting. They have no problem like getting away from him. That's for sure. I don't need the bench. Like, I don't know what to do with the Pistons unless we get Stewart and Livers both out.
Right. If Stewart starts at 5,400 with power forward eligibility, he's going to look decent as well. His ownership will certainly come up from the 4% mark that it's at right now if he's starting. But Jaden Ivey, Killian Hayes, Bojan Bogdanovich, they're all just sort of in that range where you're not going out of your way to prioritize them, but they are just going to be, kind of helpful, useful pieces to round out a lineup. They certainly give you plenty of upside, but they're also more or less correctly priced. Kind of surprising to see, or weird, I guess, to see Hayes now getting less ownership than Jaden Ivey at $100 less, when it wasn't that long ago that you were getting a lot more ownership going to Hayes at a more expensive price tag. So that's kind of interesting to me. I think that, if you wanted to just play like a little bit more Hayes, a little bit less Ivy, that would be perfectly reasonable, but they're both very, very similar plays.
Yeah, I don't have anything else here for Detroit. That starting lineup will be very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely glad this is a 7:30 game and not like a 9 o'clock where it's just like, oh, I need to sit around and wait to swap for shitty Pistons players.
Right. And obviously, like, if we just get Isaiah Stewart out earlier in the day, that also fixes the question mark, because then Jalen Duren most likely is just starting and playing big minutes. I assume they don't go to Noel, but like, the Stewart news is really everything. If Stewart is in, then you need the starting lineup.
Agreed.
On the Brooklyn side of this one, solid ownership coming in across the board. Now, they are on a back-to-back after yesterday's game against Philly. We have no idea who's in or out. I'm assuming that everybody is just in for Brooklyn. I don't have any reason to suspect that anybody is going to sit here. 25+% ownership coming to Kyrie on both sites. We're in like the 15 to 20 range on O'Neal, Claxton, Simmons, and Curry. I'm getting a ton of Brooklyn. Obviously a great matchup here against the Pistons, but I'm expecting Kyrie Irving to be one of my most exposed players for today. I expect him to just thrash Detroit. I don't think 27% ownership is enough. I think he's my favorite pay up option today.
Yeah, I think he looks really good. It's a good matchup. He's 10-3. The price is getting up there, but he's just obviously going to take on a bigger role without Kevin Durant. You're getting around 38 minutes from him on a nightly basis. Overall this year, in 442 minutes without Durant on the floor, 1.33 DraftKings points per minute, 32% usage rate, 27.5% assist percentage. In 6 total full games without Durant, 1.44 DraftKings points per minute in 38.7 minutes per game, 32.5% usage rate, 31.5% assist percentage. And, it's just a little bit smaller slate than yesterday. It's not the same one where you have, Kyrie looks good, but you also have Dame, you also have SGA, you also have Curry, you also have Morant. Like, it's just thinned out a little bit today, which is why you're getting 27% ownership and a 25% chance of being optimal. He just looks really, really good.
Yeah, I have an absolute ton right now, and I am not mad about it at all. How do you want to handle the rest of Brooklyn? I think the way that their ownership is coming in seems about right. Like they all look like solid plays. We're starting to see a very clear rotation. The guy that I'm getting to the most out of anybody else is Seth Curry, mostly just because he's the only other guy that like really handles the ball. Fine by me, should get open against the Pistons, but whether it's O'Neal, Claxton, Simmons, Curry, I'm just going to have a bunch of the Nets.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Claxton in particular, I think, is really interesting to note. He once again played 38 minutes last night. He's started playing huge minutes recently, and he has also been more productive without Durant on the floor. 1.23 DraftKings points per minute overall for Claxton this year when Kevin Durant is not on the floor. In the 6 games he's played without Durant and with Kyrie, 1.18 DraftKings points per minute, 35.4 minutes per game. So even though you get some sticker shock at that price tag, I think he looks very good here in a good matchup. Ben Simmons at 6,700 is kind of interesting to talk about just because I get, it's a 6-game slate. It's a good matchup against the Pistons. My only concern is the same one that I've mentioned the last few games. With Kyrie in, I really expect around 30 minutes from Ben Simmons, give or take a minute or two. I just don't expect him to be in the closing lineup all that often. I expect Seth Curry to be closing over him frequently. And because you don't need him out there as a playmaker in the closing lineup, and you don't want him on the floor because he can't shoot free throws. It's just you've consistently seen him not closing either one or both halves when Kyrie is in, even with Durant out. So you're getting 20% ownership to a $6,700 guy that averages about a fantasy point per minute and is likely to play about 30 minutes. That just seems a little bit high to me, but you do still have to acknowledge how high the ceiling is, because if Ben Simmons does happen to close a game and play 34 minutes instead of 30, he is probably playing well. He gives you that triple double upside. So clearly a nice ceiling at 6,700. I just don't totally love the ownership there. O'Neal, Curry, Harris, you're never excited about those guys, but they're just all at reasonable price tags given the minutes that they're playing. We only saw 20 minutes last night for Joe Harris, but that certainly can come up, especially if he's knocking down shots. Seth Curry, 5K, played 34 last night. That obviously can come down, but still, likely to be in the closing lineup. And then Royce O'Neal, is just pretty much always going to be out there for 34 to 36 minutes. So those guys, not nearly as interesting to talk about. There's nothing really to say about them, but they're just solid plays at their respective salaries.
Harris actually fouled out last night. They closed with Yuta Watanabe.
That makes sense. I knew they closed with Watanabe. I didn't even notice why Harris didn't play.
Yeah. So when I started looking at it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I was like, oh, because I didn't think Joe Harris fouled out was like my first assumption.
Right, yeah,
I was like, they went to Watanabe.
It did not even cross my mind. They closed the first half with Simmons over Harris, but he actually had 3 fouls at that point as well. I don't know if that was the reason, because he picked up his 3rd foul with 10 minutes and 18 seconds to go in the second. They didn't actually sub him out until the 6-minute, 37-second mark. So it's not like they just immediately subbed him out. But that could have just been the point where they're like, all right, now let's not have Joe Harris pick up his 4th foul, at the end of this half. So could have potentially lost minutes there as well.
Yeah, at first I was like, man, I'm going to get a bunch of Watanabe if they're like willing to close with him. And I was like, I knew there was a catch.
Actually, I bet he did lose a couple of minutes there, because if you think about the rotation, so he played 5.5 minutes in the first quarter and then goes to the bench, comes back and starts the second quarter, plays 5.5 minutes. Normally, I bet he comes in and plays the last couple minutes of the first half in place of Simmons, but they probably just didn't bring him back because of that foul.
Yeah. Anything else for Brooklyn?
No.
They just look really good. Chicago Bulls are 5.5-point favorites in Charlotte, 232 total. For the Bulls, what we've seen over the past few games, no Lonzo, no Javonte Green, and still no Goran Dragic. Not a lot of weird stuff going on here. It's your standard issue, like 10 to 15 ownership on DeRozan, Levine, and Vooch. Patrick Williams, you could add to that list as well. Big time ownership coming into Alex Caruso. He's been at 28 minutes a game for the past 2 with no Dragic out there. 26% owned. I guess it makes some sense. A little bit of love coming into Ayo Dosunmu as well. 10% owned. Kobe White getting some love, which is happening for me as well. I don't really want Dosunmu and Kobe White, but I'm kind of matching the field right now. I just find Chicago to be like really easy to talk about and just really uninteresting.
Yeah, as far as Dosunmu and White go, I think kind of just products of the slate right now. If other stuff opens up, then clearly they're going to look less appealing because they're never really guys that you want to get to. But you're probably getting mid to upper 20s from Ayo Dosunmu. You're probably getting low to mid 20s from Kobe White. Neither one, you don't really want to get to either one, but just sort of lineup filler on those guys. Alex Caruso at 4,100, pulling a ton of ownership right now. I think that he is the preferred option. Like, he's probably going to play more minutes, but it's just, should he really be getting 26% ownership while the Dosunmu gets 10 and White gets 7? And the answer is probably not. Like, if you look at optimal percentages, 11.5% for Caruso, 9.5% for White, 6.5% for Dosunmu, but you're getting 4 times the ownership compared to White, and 2.5 times compared to Dosunmu. So it's just a spot where Caruso is the best play of the 3, but you're also probably just going to see the field sort of overrepresent Caruso relative to the other 2. As far as players you actually want to roster here, Vooch, DeRozan, LaVine all obviously look good, as they normally do. LaVine's price tag has dropped back down to 8,900 on DraftKings, which is nice. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. He's still pulling less ownership than both Vooch and DeRozan, which is interesting because I think they're pretty similar plays. Like, I think that LaVine is the third play, probably, with them all at about the same price point, but he does have the best positional eligibility on DraftKings with shooting guard, small forward, so that bumps him up a bit. Certainly a good spot to get to any of these guys. Vooch should torch this front court most likely. So I like all three. I like all 3 of Vooch, DeRozan, LaVine. I think you can tolerate any of Caruso, Williams, White, Dosunmu.
Okay. Yeah, DeRozan, LaVine, and Vooch came out like within less than a percentage point of each other in my sim. It's just, you just got to hope you get the right one for the day. Is all you can really do.
Do you have any interest in Derek Jones Jr.?
I mean, sort of, in that we're seeing a bunch of like sub 4K guys pulling ownership that doesn't make a ton of sense. He's essentially the backup center at this point in time. Is it there for you? Like, yeah, at 4% ownership, not the craziest thing on a 6-game slate. I just don't think it's going to matter when we finally get there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just thinking about it kind of in terms of the Caruso, White, Dosunmu conversation, where Jones is getting less ownership than even Dosunmu and White, but he's also forward eligible instead of guard, which typically is a little bit more useful. He's less expensive. You're probably getting 16 to 20 minutes. Yeah, again, like, I don't care if I get no Derek Jones Jr. I just think it's sort of a spot where it's like, is he really that different than these other guys?
No, we're on the same page there.
He's very different than Caruso. It's more so, is he that different than Dosunmu and White?
It's a good point. Charlotte side, kind of impossible to talk about right now. We have a Q tag on LaMelo Ball, a Q tag on Gordon Hayward, no Kelly Oubre, no Cody Martin. The trickle down of no Ball and or no Hayward is massive for this team. Mason Plumlee is 14% owned right now at 6,800. There's another reason why I would much rather have Robert Williams today, but whatever. It's Mason Plumlee. I mean, I don't think like those guys are going to be playing all that different of minutes, neither here nor there. If you have everybody in, like, I don't really mind getting to Rozier, Ball, PJ Washington. But the biggest question for this stupid team today is, who the hell is the backup center? Because whoever it is looks really good. Nick Richards is the flat 3K if it's him. I don't know what to do with these idiots.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask if you had any sort of read on who is the backup center. I don't know if you've caught, any sort of like anybody figuring out what they're doing, but whoever plays backup center at 3K is going to be a good option. If it's Mark Williams, he's a really good option because he's like a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. But even if it's Nick Richards, he at 3K makes some sense, especially if other value hasn't opened up, because it's not like he's a bad point per minute guy. He's just not as good as Mark Williams is. We got Nick Richards last game. We had gotten Mark Williams for several games prior to that. The only pattern I've really been able to make out so far is that we've yet to see a game where they only play. We've yet to see a situation where one of them only plays one game and then goes back to the bench. It's been like 2 or 3 games at a time where they're in. So like my total guess today is Nick Richards, but I don't know. Like, I'm almost tempted to just project them both for like 17 minutes and then just make sure I don't get them together. But at the same time, like, you're just going to be eating a 0 guaranteed in some of your lineups.
I went Richards today. He's in 20% of my lineups right now. So like it's an actual thing. I have seen, and I don't even want to say this out loud, but I'm going to say it. I don't even know what we have. So I might be throwing us under the bus too. In at least 2 different places in this industry, they're splitting these minutes. That is to me, very clearly the wrong answer.
Right.
You've got to pick one.
That's what I was going to say, and that's what we were doing as well. I knew we had done it before. And it goes back to what I was just saying. Like, I don't know the perfect way to handle this. Your options are basically either guess, take your best guess, understand that you're going to be wrong a lot and just take a 0, or do what I said before, where like if you're playing 150 lineups, like in small fields, I'm just going to end up guessing. And if I get to them, I get to them. In large fields, I think it's reasonable to just like end up with some exposure to both and realize you're taking some zeros. That's obviously not the perfect solution because you're taking some zeros. But I do think that splitting the minutes is like the worst approach because it's going to make it so you're not getting either guy. And unless the rotation changes, but we haven't seen it. We have not seen a 3-center rotation from Charlotte. They are playing a backup center, and that backup center is going to be a good play. The only question is which one is it? But saying, well, I'm just not going to play either isn't likely to be the correct answer because you're just giving up this value piece.
Yeah. This team so desperately needs to just trade Mason Plumlee and play both of those guys.
I was actually going through my NBA best ball teams the other day because I could have sworn that I was just grabbing Mark Williams as my last pick like constantly, but I think I was actually taking Plumlee a lot because he was just always there, and it was just like in the playoffs I really want Mark Williams, but also like if I'm just going to get free Mason Plumlee at the end of the drafts, I'll take it. So I was actually disappointed. I thought I had a lot more Mark Williams, and I was excited about it.
Before we move any further for the rest of Charlotte, I want to hit on Terry, Florida Boy 420, hit us with the super chat and said, thanks as always. You're quite welcome, Terry. And then D just with a question. What does it mean when a team has a negative alternative spread? I'm betting on DK Sportsbook for the first time. For example, the Celtics have a -8.5 alternate spread versus the Knicks.
It's just them being favored by 8.5 on the alternate spread.
Yeah. So like in sports betting, you can bet any line you want. Basically, you're just going to have a different value to that line. So like maybe you want to get 8.5 points for the Celtics, but it's going to be -1,000 or something along those lines. In this case, the alternate spread would not be -8.5 for the Celtics. That would just be the spread. I don't know if you're flip-flopping something there, but yeah, an alternate line will exist for everything, basically up and down the scope for every game. It's going to change the value of that line. I don't know if that's the best explanation, but I also don't know where else to go with it. Yeah, the center situation here for Charlotte is so incredibly aggravating. I know whoever I pick, I'm going to get it wrong, and it's going to make me want to burn my house down.
I mean, it's kind of fun, especially I think it's actually more aggravating for small field tournaments because like I don't need to be that different. I don't want to just take a 0. So I think I'll actually have to consider like, am I going to just not play either of them? In large fields, I do think it's at least kind of fun because like if the Hornets just came out and were like, Mark Williams is the backup center today, he's going to be like 15% owned. But you've been able to get him at like sub 1% because nobody has any idea if he's stepping on the floor or not.
That's going to be the best, the absolute best. Red Skittles, am I doing a trade deadline show this year? I am. I am also having an oral surgery earlier that day. So that's going to make for a really interesting show where I talk for like 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon.
But why are you doing that to yourself?
I'm getting a dental implant.
My question was more, why are you doing a 3-hour show right after you have mouth surgery?
Because it's the NBA trade deadline, and that's what I do.
Love the dedication.
It's my favorite show of the year.
I did know that. It's not All-Star Game home run derby props.
No, not so much. I'm usually just like, I'm not going to make it. I have anything else. I've got a colonoscopy that day, which sounds way better.
You go into the doctor, like, hey, so why'd you schedule this? You're like, because the alternative was talking about the home run derby.
My problem was not realizing that I scheduled this implant for that same day. That was a giant mistake. But if I tried to kick it down the road, it'd be like another 6 weeks out. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to be like gooned on painkillers and stuff. We should have a real good time. Yeah. Bring it up.
Hopefully you still have a job after. Don't say anything too bad.
Yeah. At least I can blame it on something. Sure. Hopefully Rachel doesn't watch that one. What do you want to do with the rest of the Hornets here? Is it even something we could talk about right now?
I mean, I think it's really difficult. If LaMelo is in, it makes this team outside of the center position not look very appealing. You have a priced up Rozier, Washington, McDaniels, loses some value. If Ball is out, though, I think you can certainly go back to Rozier, makes Washington look a little bit better, makes $4,500 Dennis Smith Jr. look a bit better. He has been coming off the bench, but still playing upper 20s in minutes. We got the Bryce McGowan start last game, but that was pretty much a spot start where he's still not very interesting from a fantasy standpoint.
Anything else here?
No, just to reiterate, in case it wasn't clear, do not know who is playing backup center for the Hornets. One guy, whoever plays, is a good value option. It's a guess, but especially in large field tournaments, the payoff is really nice if you guess correctly. My educated guess right now, and it's not very educated, would be Nick Richards, but we're talking like, I don't know, 55, 45, 52, 48, like confidence level here.
The payoff is also really nice at PrizePicks, the presenting sponsor of this show. If you sign up using the link in the description, and you can deposit up to $100, they'll match whatever that deposit is. So put in 100, they'll give you 100. You're picking player props, so taking over-unders. Put together 5 on one card. You'll net up to 10x your entry fee. You can even get a little bit back if you only get 3 or 4 right. You can do this across sports, NBA, NFL, NHL, college basketball, soccer, Australian basketball, if you'd like, PGA, tennis, League of Legends. It's all sorts of crazy stuff. Adam and I are going to hit on player props right now. First one up for us. We've got fantasy scores for a couple guys. We're heading to Brooklyn. First guy up, again, fantasy points here. Kyrie Irving over under 48.5.
Over.
Yes, I have a very sizable over on that one. Give me all of the Kyrie Irving. We're sticking with the Nets because that's the only ones that exist. Ben Simmons, 33.5.
We have a slight over. I don't love it, but I mean, I agree with our minutes projection as well. So I guess over.
I got a 30. I have 33.3. Like, that's just one I'm staying away from. Nick Claxton, 40.5.
Over.
Same. Royce O'Neal, 23.5.
Over.
Joe Harris, 19.5. I've got the under.
Slight on. I mean, we have it at 19.3. So just neither, really.
There we go. This is what you can do at PrizePicks. We've got a PrizePick player prop tool at Stokastic.com that I think will help you out as well. So go check it out. And thank you to PrizePicks for being the sponsor. To the Cleveland Cavaliers, 7.5-point favorites in Houston, 221 total. That is the lowest total on today's slate. Q tag on Donovan Mitchell. No idea if this dude is playing. We've got 32% ownership coming into Kevin Love right now. If you want to know what this slate looks like, I know power forward eligibility is helpful here, but this is where like some of those other pay down guys that aren't getting any love should probably, like the Charlotte dudes, for instance, should be getting that sort of love. Speaking of love, what do you think about Kevin Love today? I'm starting there because of his ownership.
Yeah, I mean, the ownership's insane. I think that ends up coming down just because that's crazy high. Like it's a good matchup against Houston, but and he's only 3,400. I think it does also sort of depend on Donovan Mitchell. Like if Mitchell's in, you can just, it's very possible for Kevin Love to play fewer minutes. If Mitchell's out, you probably do get some sort of a trickle down to Kevin Love. But I mean, you're talking about a guy that played 12 minutes last game, is playing through a known injury. It's affecting his play and seemingly his playing time. But also he's 3,400. Like if the guy plays 15, 16 minutes, he's probably giving you a good point per dollar score, or at least, a serviceable one. I really wish he was like 4K or 4,200, so it wasn't as annoying of a situation. But I think he's a good value just because he is so cheap. But I also think he's getting way too much ownership right now.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. Obviously, if Mitchell is out, you just really, really like Darius Garland. Mobley and Allen are probably largely independent of that. They're pulling a lot of ownership. How do you feel about those two guys for today?
I think they look really good. It's a good matchup against Houston. They are mostly independent of Mitchell. Mobley's production goes up a little bit if Mitchell isn't in. It shouldn't change much for Jared Allen, but 6,500 Jared Allen playing low to mid 30s. I mean, he played 39 last game, but, expecting around 34 or so on average. Still just a really, really good spot for him. Mobley is up to 7,200, which is starting to be a pretty healthy price tag. But if he avoids foul trouble, you're probably getting around 35 minutes or so. He played 38 last game in a very good spot. And again, his production does go up a little bit if Mitchell's out. So I like Allen a lot, no matter what. Another center that just looks great. Evan Mobley, I like either way, but certainly like him more if Mitchell is out. Darius Garland, I like either way, but certainly like him a lot more if Mitchell is out. And then you have Karis LeVert at 5,600, who I have basically no interest in if Mitchell is in, and is probably going to be in like every lineup I play if Mitchell is out. Do you have any interest in Rubio?
No. Should I?
I don't know. Is he that much worse than Kevin Love?
Holy shit, he's 11% owned. No, I don't have interest in Rubio.
Wait, is he? Oh yeah, my eyes jumped. I thought he was like 4. I flipped him in a Okoro when I looked at ownership. Okay, do you have any interest in Okoro?
I have more of an interest in Okoro, I guess. I don't really have an interest in either of these guys. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I don't have a ton of interest in Mobley or Allen either.
I mean, I think you're insane on Allen.
Like, I'm getting to some here, but this is another situation where like I'm just getting to Robert Williams in lieu of Jared Allen in the 20% ownership. So I guess I'm speaking of it more in like a GPP sense. Do I think Jared Allen is better on paper? Yeah, I do.
So where I was going with Rubio, he only played 13 minutes last game. He played 19 in the game that Mitchell missed 2 games ago. So physically, he can play those minutes. Kevin Love's getting 32% ownership at the same price. I don't hate getting to some Rubio, especially if Mitchell's out. Like if you need to. Like, I'm not saying, oh yeah, this is a wildly mispriced Ricky Rubio, but if you're just going to end up having to play your favorites of Alex Caruso, Kevin Love, Kobe White, I would assume like there's no reason Ricky Rubio's not in that mix.
This MPJ conversation that's going on in chat right now, you guys are, if I had the time to tear this apart, I would, but holy moly, are there some bad takes going on in here. I just don't have the energy. I don't have enough time to rip it to shreds. So we're going to go ahead and move on from Cleveland.
All I've seen is that all I see, I wasn't paying attention to it. So I see SMP saying that he's good, which makes me think a bunch of people are saying he's bad and that SMP is right as usual.
Yes, you have nailed that one. Nailed it completely. Somehow it's destroying Nikola Jokic's prime.
The far and away best player in the NBA is being held back by Michael Porter.
He is such a good fit around Nikola Jokic. It's insane. I can't right now. I don't have the time. So we're going to keep it moving. We're going to go to Houston. And for the Rockets, they are on a back-to-back. We did get Jabari Smith back last night. I'm projecting this Rockets team exactly like I projected them yesterday with no changes, at which point, sign me up for some 8% owned $8,700 Alperen Şengün, who smashed again last night, played 37 minutes. I'm also very happy to get some Eric Gordon, some Jabari Smith, some Kenyon Martin. Don't have any problem getting to Jalen Green, but that dude also can't make a shot, generally speaking. I like the starting 5 here for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, shitty matchup, but I like the lack of ownership that helps make up for that. Alperen Şengün is just an absolute monster. He's still 8,700. Again, very difficult spot here, very different than last night against Washington, but you're seeing increased playing time from him. You're seeing increased production with Kevin Porter Jr. out. If he's only going to be 8% owned or so, there's certainly a very high ceiling there that offsets the difficult matchup. So, it's a very different spot than last night in that you're not as comfortable going to him, but all of the same outside of the matchup last night, like all the same reasons that we liked him and he was popular, hold here. 1.3 fantasy points per minute on average without Porter. He played another 30, almost 37 minutes last night. In tournaments, I think he's a good option if you can get there. KJ Martin at 5K, again, just fits easily into lineups. I have no issue getting away from him where I can because he's not a very good point per minute guy, but he's likely to give you around 30 minutes, played 34 last night, and just fit easily into lineups. Jalen Green is just a huge boom or bust play in tournaments. 2% owned with no Kevin Porter is always going to be interesting because you're just talking about somebody with a 33% usage rate without Porter on the floor. But like you said, he is inefficient. It is a tough matchup. You're likely to just get a frustrating game where you look and you're like, damn, if Jalen Green had made any of his shots, he'd have had a good game, but he didn't because that's what he does. But, the ceiling is certainly there. Eric Gordon and Jabari Smith both look fine. It is interesting. Again, you're getting 14% ownership to KJ Martin. You're getting 2 to Jabari Smith. I don't think that gap should be nearly that big. Smith's been just shy of a fantasy point per minute guy without Kevin Porter on the floor this year. Similarly, you're getting 6 to Eric Gordon if he plays. compared to 14 for KJ Martin. I think that gap should be smaller. So assuming Eric Gordon's in, I think him and Smith are both interesting pivots away from KJ Martin.
I have nothing else here.
If Gordon's out, does Eason start or does Tate start, do you think?
That's a good question.
Because if it's
Tate, honestly see it being Garrison Matthews.
I mean, I could see that too. I just wouldn't be surprised if they slid KJ Martin up and put Eason back in, given that he started a couple games recently and played well.
Matthews got 28 minutes in that game without Jabari Smith on Monday.
Also, a big Cleveland front court makes me think maybe they go Eason.
Yeah, I could see that.
So like, I guess just to touch on it, if it's Garrison Matthews, like, he's 3K, and if you want to try and get lucky, sure, but there's nothing interesting to say there. If it's Jayshawn Tate that starts in place of Eric, if Jayshawn Tate were to start in place of Eric Gordon at 4K, he looks good, point guard, small forward. If Tari Eason were to get a start at 4,400, he looks fantastic.
There we go. Let's keep it moving to the 10 o'clock starts. Big gap, 2 hours until we get to this one. Dallas Mavericks, 1.5-point dogs in Phoenix, 222 total. We know how much Dallas likes taking on these Phoenix Suns. No Christian Wood, no Maxi Kleber. We saw just the core 8-man rotation for the Mavs on Tuesday. That is the same 8-man rotation I'm going to today. We've got basically 15 to 20% ownership coming into everyone here from Dallas, except for Reggie Bullock and I guess Davis Bertans. It's just a lot of ownership. I agree that most of these guys should be getting some love on a 6-game slate. There's just so many minutes to go around. 12-7 Luka is very difficult to me to get to today, right now. Yeah, as we get more news, we'll see.
Right. So this is really, really interesting because on the one hand, it is a 6-game slate. You have Luka. You really want to get there. The thing that's concerning to me is the number of sub 4K guys that we have talked about today that are pulling a bunch of ownership that seem really bad. The reason they're getting that ownership is so you can get to Luka in large part. So not only are you going to get, it's not like Luka's ownership by itself is crazy at 18%. I think the problem is that like a very high percentage of the Luka lineups are going to be like, oh yeah, and here's Kevin Love, and here's Alex Caruso, and here's, these really, really chalky, very, very thin value plays. Whereas you can get a really high ceiling by saying like, all right, well, I'm going to save money and we're going to go to like Alperen Şengün, different position, but just kind of thinking, through like the mid-range, Kyrie obviously getting ownership too, but like, let's say, you end up with Şengün, or you end up with more Julius Randle, or you end up with more like Darius Garland, Vooch, Levine, guys like that, and just get a little bit more balanced. And then if you do happen to get the game where, Kevin Love goes for 18 fantasy points and, he's a good point per dollar play, there's a good chance that you actually would still need Luka to really put up that big game and not just be like, oh, Luka scored 65, you have to have him. So I do think it's kind of interesting to go a little bit more balanced, at least with the way value looks right now. But all of that being said, Luka is Luka, and clearly getting to him is very, very good. It's just a matter of like how different can you make the rest of your lineups look.
Yeah, I hate this so much. I'm barely getting to him right now. This is a guy that I've had like 80% of in some of these other matchups. Like a Phoenix spot isn't a great spot, but we know how he sort of feels about Phoenix. Not that that changes anything for me. This is going to be a day where I don't have him and he's going to hang a 90.
Yeah.
The rest of these guys though, Dinwiddie, Hardaway, DFS, Josh Green, who played 32.5 minutes on Tuesday. Dwight Powell, who did end up getting those 33 minutes and became a decent play on Tuesday. Like, you got to have these guys.
Yeah, they're just playing a condensed rotation. They're playing a ton of minutes. They're still reasonably priced. Josh Green at 3,500 pulling 20% ownership. It's another spot where it's just like, yeah, that's a good value play. 20% ownership is a ton. Dorian Finney-Smith pulling 16% at 4,200. Dwight Powell pulling 16%. Like, all of these guys, I think, are going over-owned, but they are also still good point per dollar values. It's just a matter of, can you find contrarian plays elsewhere in your lineup? Tim Hardaway Jr. at 5,300 should play mid to upper 30s. Spencer Dinwiddie should play mid to upper 30s as well. He's coming in at 6,400, so a little bit of a reduced salary for him, and also a little bit better projection now that Christian Wood is out. Certainly more favorable for him to be playing extra minutes alongside, Finney-Smith or Dwight Powell compared to Christian Wood.
This is just It's a really, really weird team right now, but I'm going to have basically shares of everybody except for Bertans. And it's really not going to feel great. Ugh. Anything else for Dallas? I think they're really easy to talk about. Luka Doncic will likely look a little bit different later today, too, if we start opening up some news.
Yeah. And as stuff opens up that looks good, like he just becomes that much more appealing. For example, and it doesn't have to be, 3K guys either. If you get the situation where Donovan Mitchell's out, it makes Darius Garland look better, but it also gives you a $5,600 Karis LeVert. It makes a $3,300 Rubio look a little bit better as well. If you get Isaiah Stewart out, then you can be more confident going to a $5,100 Jalen Duren. So yeah, like I think it's still getting to Luka should be I don't want to say priority because it makes it sound like I'm just doing like everything I can to get him in. But the more value that opens up, the easier it's going to be to make contrarian Luka lineups.
On the Phoenix side, no Landry Shamet, no Devin Booker, no Cam Payne, Josh Okogie, and DeAndre Ayton are in. Only Chris Paul crosses the double-digit mark in ownership. I will likely be there once again. He was on pace to play like 34 minutes or more if it wasn't just an ass beating against Charlotte on Tuesday. DeAndre Ayton, I think, looks kind of interesting at 7,500. Big-time usage bump with no Payne and no Booker around. I don't mind getting to Cam Johnson at 5,300. But I don't find Phoenix to be all that interesting. Matchups against Dallas rarely are.
Yeah, very, very slow Dallas team. The 7,700 on Paul certainly looks fine with no Booker, and given that he's playing huge minutes, Ayton should have plenty of success against this front court at 7,500. Plenty of usage for him as well, like you said. Only pulling 10% ownership. So I do think center just kind of stands out right now as a position where you can get contrarian without sacrificing a lot in the way of ceiling. It's just going to change the way you build your lineups. And that kind of goes back to the Luka point. Like if you're getting to more Ayton and Şengün and Vooch, it is going to make it that much more difficult to get the Luka, whereas everybody else is going to know your Dwight Powell or Jalen Duren or whoever else, Jared Allen, like that they're going to, they're less expensive. But that is one kind of interesting way that you can mix things up. Cam Johnson only played 18 minutes last game, but I wouldn't read into that. It was a blowout. He didn't play at all down the stretch. 7% ownership to him at 5,300, I think, is just another interesting pivot away from like your KJ Martin type guys that are getting twice as much ownership. Not that I love Cam Johnson, but I don't think he's really any different than KJ Martin. So that's interesting. I'm not chasing the Dario Saric explosion. Yeah, I think Paul, Ayton, Cam Johnson are pretty much where I'm at.
Without digging in any further, just snap answer. 0% to 100%. How much does DVP matter to you in NBA?
0.
Thank you.
If you wanted to make a case for it, I think it would be centers because they actually mostly defend each other. But as far as also why it doesn't matter, it's just that there's other things that are more predictive. Like for one, especially when you're talking about non-centers, it's just like team defense is going to matter a lot more. But like it's not as simple as saying, oh, the point guard, because some point guards are very high frequency pick and roll guys. Some guys aren't. If you wanted to make a case for play type versus defense, you're probably going in a better direction than just simply position versus defense. But again, like pace is going to matter. Team defense is going to matter. Overall, just who the player is going to matter. You just get a lot of noise if you just look at DVP. Like the best example I can remember, and it's from a few years ago, was LeBron was playing against like the Pacers or somebody. The team doesn't matter. And Anthony Davis was out. It was a clear LeBron looks great here spot. And people in chat are like, oh, it's a bad spot because Indiana's very good against small forwards. And it's like, well, one, LeBron is not a small forward, but like most teams have shitty small forwards. Like that's what you label the guy who's a 3-and-D guy that, is a 16% usage guy, stands in the corner and shoots. That's not comparable at all to LeBron. So telling me that teams defend Isaac Okoro well doesn't tell me that they defend LeBron James well.
Yeah. I mean, here's a great example right now. Let's say Kyrie Irving isn't on the floor for tonight. What position does Ben Simmons play to you?
Right. He's the point guard.
Sure. Or he's the power forward, or he's the center. Are we using the position that DraftKings tells you they play, or FanDuel? Because we see a lot of the times that those guys don't even agree. So what position do you mean? Who's the scorekeeper for that game? Like, even just right out of the gate, it's super easy to blow holes in. We've got 5 minutes. We don't have time to dig into this. That's why I went 0 to 100. And you were just like, by the way, here's 3 more minutes.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, so Jeremy Savage says said there's factors, but it definitely matters. People have been targeting certain teams that suck for a reason. Yeah, they suck. Teams that are bad defensively are bad defensively, but like, yeah, there's factors that overlap that are just better to be paying attention to.
I mean, he hit. I have to bring it up. So this is one of the reasons I get to plays that no one else does. Got it.
Who said that?
Jeremy Savage.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it is. The Spurs are 13-point dogs in LA. Massive dogs here. They are also on a back-to-back from yesterday. Assuming we don't have Romeo Langford or Devin Vassell for this one. Zach Collins is 22% owned. I guess I get it for today at 3,700, given the way the rest of this center position is shaken out. I don't really know how to say, like, I really like a Spur today.
Yeah, it's more so just kind of rotating them in and out of lineups. 3,700 for Collins is fine. You got the big game out of him yesterday. He's a good point per minute guy. It's just a matter of how many minutes does he end up getting. Pirtle also is going to look good at 6K. I don't think Pirtle should ever be getting 1/3 the ownership of Zach Collins. I understand he's more expensive, but it makes him look really good in tournaments. Sohan at 4,800 is just another cheap forward that you can throw in the lineups here and there. Keldon Johnson's got a massive ceiling, 31% usage rate without Devin Vassell, but on average, priced about where he should be, if not a little bit overpriced. I don't think there's a lot that stands out. I think it's just kind of throwing value darts at guys like Collins or Sohan or Keldon Johnson. Josh Richardson, not Keldon Johnson. He's 7,400. Or, higher upside pieces like Pirtle or Keldon.
22% ownership to Collins. You get that Kevin Love ownership. I told you, the center position is weird today.
Yep. It is starting to kind of concern me how many there are, because like individually, it's just like, I'm fine not playing a 20% owned Zach Collins, but it's like, well, now I need really cheap Zach Collins not to do anything, and really cheap Kevin Love not to do anything, and really cheap Ricky Rubio not to do anything. And if any of them do, you're starting to get to where Luka is a problem.
Finally, the Clippers. Q tag on Marcus Morris. Q tag on Luke Kennard. I don't have a clue how to project this rotation, but I know this much. $8,500 shooting guard, small forward, Paul George, I think looks really good. He is pulling the ownership already. I have no problem getting there. I kind of like Marcus Morris if he's in. I don't mind Norm Powell. Batum's got power forward center at 3,800. I can see it on a day like today. Zubats, obviously, always is sort of interesting. This team is just impossible, especially if those guys are either in or out, like not knowing their status.
Right. It's really difficult to talk about right now because we don't know their statuses, but this is a good spot. Basically, no matter who is in or out, Paul George, 8,500 shooting guard, small forward is going to look good. He's pulling 30% ownership, and I have no issue with that. Zubats, 5,700, 3% owned. I don't get it. I never do. The guy played 34 minutes last game. You're just seeing 30 plus minutes often enough that at no ownership and a cheap price tag, he's going to be appealing. So I, once again, like him. We don't know, if Kennard or Morris are in, so really difficult to talk about either of them. If Morris is in, sure, he's 4,700. He's just another Jeremy Sohan, KJ Martin type play. If Kennard is in, like if you told me he played 24 minutes, I would want him at 3,200, but I have no idea how many minutes he plays. But to me, Paul George is the clear priority, and Zubats is the guy that I certainly want to get to in tournaments.
All righty. I think we got to get out of here. NFL strategy coming up next. You got the deeper dive later on and NBA Bet Pro videos today?
Yeah.
There we go, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to PrizePicks for being the sponsor of this show. We got to get out of here. Hit the like button on the way out the door. Thank you very much. We're out. Peace.